Cartels have evolved. Now they fly drones, armor up convoys, and even test homemade submarines to smuggle cash and weapons. But what happens when the world's most advanced military tech faces that cunning? Could these futuristic tools finally give authorities the upper hand and change the rules of the game forever? Join us as we uncover these anti-Mexican cartel military technologies that will blow your mind. Across Mexico, the country's most powerful cartels are locked in a brutal arms race that's changing the drug war. They're not only fighting government troops under U.S. pressure to crush the drug trade, but also battling one another for control of smuggling routes. Civilians are caught in the crossfire, and once quiet regions have turned into war zones. Gone are the days when these groups relied only on handguns and rifles. Today, cartel fighters use rocket-propelled grenades, homemade mortars made from gas tanks, and trucks fitted with heavy machine guns. They bury landmines, scatter booby traps, and modify store-bought drones into flying bombs packed with toxic gas and explosives. Authorities in Michoacan recently showed piles of makeshift bombs built from plastic bottles, fire extinguishers, and even cut drain pipes, proof of how creative and deadly the cartels have become. These groups now possess the kind of weapons used by terrorists and armies. According to Mexican officials, much of that firepower comes from across the border, with around 500,000 American guns smuggled into Mexico every year. Criminals have also begun making their own weapons, even using 3D printers to build parts. Nowhere shows this deadly transformation more clearly than Tierra Caliente, a region of mountains and farmland that serves as a vital drug corridor. There, rival cartels, including La Familia Michoacana, the Knights Templar, and the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, are locked in a constant fight for control. In the past 2 years, Michoacan has recorded more mine explosions than anywhere else in Mexico. Farming towns that once grew avocados and lemons now sit half-empty. Many families have fled after repeated attacks, while those who stay live under constant threat. More than 2,000 people have been displaced in just 2 years. Even children have died from hidden explosives buried along their paths to school. This level of militarization can be traced back to the mid-2000s, when Los Zetas, a cartel founded by former soldiers, introduced military tactics, encrypted radios, and battlefield discipline to organized crime. Their rivals quickly copied them, turning the drug trade into a full-scale war. In response, Mexico's military brought in better weapons and technology, often with U.S. support. The turning point came in 2015 when gunmen in Jalisco shot down a Mexican Army helicopter with a rocket launcher, killing 6 soldiers. It was the first time a criminal group had destroyed a military aircraft in Mexico, a sign that the cartels had crossed into true paramilitary territory. By 2022, Mexican intelligence confirmed that cartels were using drones, landmines, and coordinated attacks regularly. Security analyst Alexei Chavez called it a shift toward paramilitary warfare. Cheap, easy-to-modify drones have changed the battlefield. Like in Ukraine, cartels now use them to spy, bomb, and strike with precision. Even the drones have given the cartels the power to hit deep inside enemy territory, targets that were unreachable before. As tensions grow with Washington, cartels have begun importing scanners to detect government drones and hiring skilled operators to track and evade them. It's obvious that the battlefield is evolving, and so are the tools used to fight it. To counter those new defenses, authorities have begun repurposing existing kits for the fight. Among these tools are the compact-armed VTOL drones, which are deadly effective when deployed against smugglers. These drones lift straight up, hover over rough ground, and fire precision rounds at moving or fixed targets, letting security forces strike cartel convoys or fortified positions without sending troops into deadly ambushes. That standoff capability is vital because it reduces risk to patrols and allows focused disruption of cartel movement. Lightweight laser-guided missiles that small drones can carry bring true anti-vehicle power to units that once had none. These weapons can punch through light armor, stop pickup trucks used for smuggling, and force cartel fighters to abandon heavy shields. When ground teams lack armored support, a few precision missiles on demand deny enemy freedom of movement and fragment supply lines, slowing trafficking and making territory harder for cartels to hold. Precision coastal and anti-armor missiles extend the reach of tactical policing, Compact missiles with accurate guidance let forces hit hardened caches, improvised launch sites, or boats running the coast without broad bombardment. That accuracy keeps civilian harm lower and gives commanders options to remove key cartel assets at distance, a major advantage when cartels hide among civilian infrastructure. Defensive tools like handheld drone net launchers keep soldiers and police safer from hostile UAVs. Nets bring down small attack drones quickly and cheaply, blocking cartel reconnaissance and crude bombing. By denying cartels easy drone use, these countermeasures blunt one of the fastest-growing threats and protect checkpoints, convoys, and airspace over towns. Heavy-lift electric VTOLs and tandem-rotor small aircraft change logistics in hard countries. They carry supplies, batteries, medevac loads, sensors, or a small squad to remote villages without creating long, vulnerable convoys. That mobility shortens response times, keeps pressure on cartel hideouts, and lets security forces maintain presence where roads are mined or watched by lookout posts. Tethered aerostats and low-cost persistent sensors act as fixed sentries over river valleys, roads, and farms. Left aloft for days, they spot convoy routes and transient camps, turning fleeting movements into confirmed targets. Persistent surveillance lets force time raids for moments when cartel fighters are exposed, increasing the chance of capturing leaders and seizing drugs rather than trading gunfire in populated areas. Layered systems matter most when combined. Persistent eyes detect, small VTOLs inspect and strike, counter-drone tools protect forces, and heavy lifts move teams quickly. That layered approach shortens the decision loop. Find, fix, finish. For anti-cartel campaigns, this lowers collateral damage, raises arrest rates, and makes it harder for gangs to hide logistics in the hills or move product through towns. Cost and training are practical strengths. Small drones and net guns are cheaper to buy and operate than attack helicopters or large missile systems, so police and military units can field them broadly. Widespread deployment denies cartels safe spaces and forces them to change tactics, a strategic pressure point that undermines their ability to operate at scale. Building on that same idea of affordable innovation, a helium surveillance balloon offers another edge. Able to stay aloft for up to 20 days, it becomes a cheap, persistent eye over contested valleys. Launched in minutes and able to watch a 10-kilometer circle while extending FPV drone links twice that far, it turns fleeting movement into patterns you can act on. For the war against cartels, persistence matters. Cartels move at night, hide caches in folds of terrain, and rotate teams quickly. A long-endurance balloon reveals routes and camps that ground patrols miss, letting forces plan raids with better timing and fewer surprises. Which is why mobility is important for officials. A small, all-terrain, robotic scout, operating up to 15 kilometers out, gives operators an unmanned forward presence, and because it can run at 60 kilometers per hour for hours on a single charge while carrying modular sensors or light payloads, it scouts roads, sniffs for traps, and carries tiny strike or recovery kits. That matters in practice. The robot keeps people out of the danger zone and finds IEDs or ambush points before a patrol stumbles into them, so units move smarter, not harder. Meanwhile, armored personnel carriers built for modern conflict protect troops and press into contested towns. A 15-ton, remotely turreted APC resists rifle rounds and shrapnel while delivering automatic fire from distance, which lets security forces clear hostile compounds with lower risk, deny cartel checkpoints, and shield medevacs and evidence teams, protecting lives while stripping cartel freedom of action. At the same time, short-range air defense systems that fire radar-guided missiles close a major gap. Low-flying aircraft and attack drones. Because a mobile point defense unit reaches several kilometers day or night, it can intercept helicopters and armed UAVs before they reach a strike zone, stopping aerial resupply and forcing gangs to change tactics. And when infantry need immediate protection, portable electronic weapons step in. Lightweight anti-drone rifles pulse electromagnetic interference a few kilometers out to drop hostile quadcopters and scramble swarms, which means checkpoints, convoys, and urban raids are less likely to be watched from above, keeping evidence gathers, informants, and movements safer. Layer these pieces together and you get a low-collateral, layered toolkit. Long loiter balloons and fixed sensors pick a target. Robotic scouts or low-risk drones confirm and market. Precision systems or armored vehicles finish the job. That approach reduces civilian harm, raises the odds of capturing leaders alive, and closes escape routes, hitting cartel logistics instead of only foot soldiers. Cheap, fast tools change the map. So do cheap, fast logistics. When cost and speed let more units move and fight, mobility stops being a luxury and becomes a multiplier for every other tactic. This is where the French EPA amphibious rig comes into play. The French EPA amphibious rig moves across rivers and marshes like a workhorse that ignores water. Able to ferry 70 tons on its own or pair with another to haul 150 tons, it can lay a temporary bridge of 100 meters in under 10 minutes. In the war against cartels, that rapid river crossing power keeps supply lines open for security forces, lets reinforcements reach remote strongholds fast, and prevents gangs from using water barriers as safe escape routes. When roads are wrecked or bridges destroyed, 4 of these rigs can create a crossing that passes 200 vehicles an hour. At over 30 meters long and with a large loading surface, a crew of 4 can run multiple crossings per hour and sustain an offensive or humanitarian corridor. For anti-cartel campaigns, that means convoys of evidence teams, armored patrols, and emergency medical units can move reliably where cartels try to isolate communities and block state access. Thermal camouflage changes the game for small teams operating near cartel hideouts. A lightweight thermal umbrella or ghost hood masks heat signatures over several square meters and works across bitter cold to blistering heat. In the war against cartels, hiding heat signatures keep surveillance drones and infrared scouts from spotting insertion points or observation posts, letting special forces gather evidence and place trackers without turning the mission into a firefight. Discreet personal protection also matters. A compact bulletproof umbrella and a rapid deploy ballistic blanket give immediate cover for 1 or 2 people, stopping common pistol and magnum rounds while looking ordinary. In anti-cartel operations, such gear protects undercover officers, witness protection escorts, and journalists in ambush-prone towns, saving lives while preserving mobility and the element of surprise during extractions or raids. Larger perimeter systems, like an integrated anti-drone shield, provide broad protection for bases and checkpoints. A 200-kilogram station with radar and electro-optical sensors spots hostile UAVs out to 5 kilometers and links to jammers for rapid defeat. For the war against cartels, this means forward operating sites, evidence processing camps, and medical hubs can stay online without constant drone harassment or remote observation that would give gang scouts an edge. You can shut down enemy eyes in the air and harden forward hubs, but who actually carries the mission into remote, contested terrain? Enter the Mission Master, a rugged robotic pack mule which can be repurposed for anti-cartel operation. This 2,000-kilogram unmanned ground vehicle carries up to 600 kilograms of supplies at 40 kilometers per hour across a 200-kilometer range. Equipped with a 7.62mm machine gun, it provides both logistics and fire support in combat zones. With over 24 hours of battery life using a range extender, this 3.5-meter beast handles extreme conditions from desert heat to Arctic snow and swims thanks to amphibious capability. Its autonomous navigation, obstacle avoidance, and drone integration allow it to scout, resupply, and fight without putting humans in harm's way, making it perfect for anti-cartel operations where every minute counts. While Mission Master hauls the overland AI ultraventures where humans dare not go. Weighing 1,500 kilograms, this autonomous vehicle speeds at 50 kilometers per hour over a 150-kilometer range in contested areas beyond line-of-sight communication. Carrying 500 kilograms of mission-specific payload, it uses AI-driven navigation and target recognition. Even when GPS signals are jammed, it can deploy reconnaissance drones, becoming a mobile command center for surveillance, logistics, and combat. For cartels operating in remote terrain, it's a game changer, allowing security forces to monitor and respond to threats before criminals even know they are observed. At sea, the Petria Sanaka CS is a 200-kilogram acoustic mine countermeasure system. Using low-frequency sound waves, it detects and neutralizes underwater mines up to 500 meters away. Deployable from ships or unmanned surface vehicles, it works in harsh environments, including Arctic waters, ensuring safe maritime patrols and anti-smuggling operations. This sonar system makes waterways safe for naval interdiction teams, allowing them to reach cartel trafficking routes without risk. The Capstone UAV acts as a flying ambulance. Using coaxial rotors with two 5-meter blades, it carries 300 kilograms of payload across 483 kilometers during 8-hour missions. Designed for medical evacuation and resupply in areas inaccessible to traditional helicopters, it autonomously lands and flies while keeping crews safe. In the Cartel War, Capstone ensures injured officers or civilians receive rapid aid in dangerous zones, saving lives while minimizing risk. The American Millennium Gun protects ships from low-flying threats. Weighing 3,300 kilograms, it fires 35-millimeter rounds at 1,000 per minute in full auto or 200 per minute for precision. With ranges of 3,500 meters for air targets and 5,000 meters for surface targets, programmable air-burst rounds make it a no-fly zone. Cartel drones or small boats attempting attacks are neutralized before they become a threat. For field fortifications, the Maxi Printer 3D prints bunkers up to 6 meters high and 12 meters wide in 24 hours. Setup takes under 15 minutes with centimeter-level precision. Meanwhile, RAL's plastic trench system allows modular defensive positions to be assembled silently in under 2 hours. Together, they let troops quickly secure territory against cartel incursions. But building protection is only half the battle. Holding it demands accuracy and awareness. That's where next-generation targeting and clearance tools come. And precision gets surgical with the Smash 2000 LAI scope, a compact 1.1 kilogram sight that lands hits on small drones with a 95% probability out to 300 meters. On the ground, danger is buried, which is why the Doing MV-10 exists, an 18,960 kilogram mine-clearing beast that strips away 4,000 square meters of mines each hour, while operators stay a full kilometer back. Together, they shrink the kill zone and let units move when cartels think the Earth is their ally. Once routes are safe, the fight follows the traffickers into the water. Meet the Shadow Seal, a stealthy amphibious craft that makes ordinary boats look clumsy. At 12 meters and 5 tons, it roars across the surface at 55 kilometers per hour and slips beneath at 9. With room for a pilot, navigator, and 2 passengers, and remote control capability, even from a PlayStation-style controller, it slips into shallow coastal lanes and choke points where smugglers hide, turning the ocean from a blind alley into a hunted space. On land, the Mars, the modular advanced armed robotic system, acts like a relentless mechanical bodyguard. This 165-kilogram, 1.1-meter-tall robot can carry a 7.62-millimeter machine gun or a 40-millimeter grenade launcher and operate securely from up to 1 kilometer away. With full 360-degree vision, it scouts, clears danger zones, evacuates the wounded, and ferries supplies along hot routes, keeping people out of the most dangerous jobs in the anti-cartel campaign. When rooms and tunnels must be checked, Bounce Imaging's throwable camera sphere makes the first steps safe. Softball to grapefruit size, the rugged orb delivers live, full 360 video and infrared for low-light ops, survives hard impacts, and streams to Android and iOS devices for roughly 2 hours. A tiny, brave eye that saves lives during breaches and compound searches. Farther out, the Saildrone Surveyor watches the sea without sleeping. This 20-meter autonomous vessel runs on wind and solar for up to 12 months, carrying 500 kilograms of sensors while cruising at 13 kilometers per hour. Radar, sonar, cameras, and seafloor mapping to 11,000 meters turn long stretches of ocean into monitored lanes, spotting hidden routes and trailing smugglers before cargo ever reaches shore. And when logistics and endurance decide outcomes, the mission master answers the call. This 2,000-kilogram unmanned ground vehicle hauls 600 kilograms at 40 kilometers per hour across a 200-kilometer range, runs more than 24 hours on extended power packs, and even offers amphibious capability. As an anti-cartel robotic logistician, it moves gear, evacuates casualties, and keeps convoys lighter, faster, and less exposed to ambush. Stacked together, these systems, precision scopes, mine-clearing giants, stealthy amphibious craft, armed robots, throwable scouts, long-endurance sail drones, and heavy unmanned transport, form a layered, relentless network against mobile, well-armed criminal networks. The war on drugs in Venezuela is intensifying. Instead of symbolic shows of force, the United States operations now rely on precision strikes from drones, satellite-guided missiles, elite special forces raids, and now the mother of all bombs that leaves destruction in its wake. Cartel compounds once thought untouchable are being wiped out in coordinated assaults. What sort of destruction does the mother of all bombs leave in its wake? How would the cartels react to such an attack? Join us as we explore the devastating effects that followed as the United States B-2 Spirit drops. Another mother of all bombs on Venezuelan cartels. The United States military made history when it used the most powerful conventional bomb in its arsenal for the first time in combat. The weapon was the GBU-43, also known as the Massive Ordnance Air Blast Bomb. Many people called it the mother of all bombs because of its huge size and destructive power. Weighing over 21,000 pounds, the bomb was carefully pushed out of the back of a U.S. Air Force MC-130 Special Operations aircraft. The massive plane was flying over Afghanistan's eastern Nangarhar province when the order was given to strike. The target was a network of tunnels and caves in the Akin district. This area had become a stronghold for ISIS-K, the branch of the Islamic State group operating in Afghanistan. Militants there were using underground passages to hide, move weapons, and plan attacks. By dropping the bomb directly on this complex, the U.S. military aimed to destroy their hiding place and weaken their operations. When the Moab detonated, the results were devastating. According to U.S. military officials, the explosion killed at least 94 ISIS fighters. The blast was so powerful that it shook the entire region. The strike was widely seen as a show of American military strength. The use of the Moab caught the world's attention. Newspapers, television channels, and online outlets around the globe reported on the bombing. Many saw it as a message not only to ISIS, but also to other potential enemies of the United States. Analysts said it showed that under President Donald Trump, the U.S. military was willing to use its deadliest non-nuclear weapons without hesitation. Countries like North Korea were believed to have taken note of the signal of power. Now imagine what would happen if the same kind of firepower were directed at powerful drug cartels instead of ISIS. These criminal groups often build hidden labs, warehouses, and secret tunnels, much like terrorist organizations. A single strike with a weapon like the Moab could wipe out a massive drug production site in seconds. Cartel leaders, who rely on fear and secrecy, would suddenly realize that their hiding places offer no safety against such overwhelming force. It would send a chilling message to all criminal networks that their vast empires could be reduced to rubble instantly. The war on drugs, which often feels endless, might take a very different turn if cartels face the same level of military pressure once used against ISIS. When people talk about the mother of all bombs, it often gets confused with another monster in America's arsenal, the massive ordnance penetrator. But these two weapons, while both huge and terrifying, are very different in design, purpose, and use on the battlefield. Todd Harrison, a defense budget expert at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C., described the Moab as a crash project. After the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks, the United States found itself facing al-Qaeda and the Taliban on unfamiliar terrain in Afghanistan. Harrison explained that this was an adversary whose tactics were uncertain and difficult to predict, and the U.S. military was willing to try almost anything to gain the upper hand. What began as a counter-terrorism campaign quickly spiraled into something far larger. The war did not go as expected, Harrison said, noting that no one imagined American forces would still be engaged in Afghanistan 15 years later. What was supposed to be a short fight became a long counterinsurgency and occupation. The Moab was never meant to be a polished long-term program. It was a quick-turn effort to meet an urgent battlefield need, not a formal procurement project. The Air Force acted as the system integrator, piecing it together from available technology, and in the end, only about 15 bombs were ever built. Interestingly, part of the bomb's design drew from technology found in Soviet-era intercontinental ballistic missiles. It was tested in Florida at Eglin Air Force Base back in 2003, but for more than a decade, it sat unused in real combat. That changed dramatically when it was finally unleashed against ISIS fighters in Afghanistan. Restarting production of the MOAB today would be no simple task. Harrison pointed out that most of the original parts are no longer available, and newer components would require a redesign and fresh rounds of testing. Inflation and modern manufacturing costs would push the price far higher than the original estimates. For that reason, he believes it is unlikely that the Air Force will ever restart full-scale production, especially given the limited demand. But the MOAB was never just about blowing things up. It was also about psychological warfare. Harrison emphasized that the bomb's very existence sends a signal. Developing and fielding it quickly showed potential adversaries that the U.S. was willing to innovate rapidly when faced with new threats. The idea that America could build such a massive weapon in-house, practically on the fly, complicates enemy decision-making and forces them to think twice. Retired Air Force General T. Michael Buzz Mosley echoed this point. He explained that the MOAB was designed for wide-area effects, both physically and mentally. The sheer blast effect makes it devastating on the battlefield, but it also delivers a powerful message to anyone watching. It tells opponents and even allies that the U.S. is willing to unleash unprecedented force when needed. Mosley had firsthand experience commanding during this era. Between 2001 and 2003, he led the 9th Air Force and U.S. Central Command Air Forces at a time when the Air Force still had the BLU-82B Daisy Cutter bomb, the MOAB's predecessor, deployed forward. While he did not comment on why the MOAB was chosen over the massive ordnance penetrator for the ISIS strike, he did stress that both weapons were in limited supply. One thing that makes the MOAB outstanding is that it is all about creating a massive air blast. As its name suggests, it is meant to explode above ground or just on softer surfaces, such as cave entrances or tunnel systems. The key here is that it does not have to burrow deep. Instead, it spreads its destructive power across a wide radius, flattening anything caught in the blast zone. On the other hand, the MOP is the Air Force's true bunker buster. This weapon was built to dig through reinforced concrete and earth to destroy hidden command posts, underground shelters, and other hardened structures. In terms of sheer size, the MOAB is gigantic, tipping the scales at nearly 22,000 pounds. But the MOP is even bigger, weighing in at around 33,000 pounds, making it the largest non-nuclear bomb in America's stockpile. Yet weight alone doesn't tell the whole story. What makes the MOAB so infamous is its payload. Packed with nearly 18,000 pounds of high explosives, it creates a blast equal to roughly 11 tons of TNT. In comparison, the MOP's warhead carries just over 5,000 pounds of explosives, less than a third of the MOAB's punch. So why is the MOP considered the bigger bomb? Because size here is about purpose. The MOP's bulk is what allows it to punch deep into the earth before detonating, destroying underground facilities that normal bombs could never reach. The MOAB, by contrast, is designed to devastate everything above ground or in shallow tunnels with overwhelming shock waves. It's not about precision burrowing, it's about unleashing fear and firepower in one enormous strike. Deployment is another key difference. The MOAB is pushed out of the back of a cargo plane, specifically a C-130 aircraft, and once released, it uses its fins to guide itself toward the target. The MOP, however, is far more advanced. It is GPS guided and designed to be carried by stealth bombers, such as the B-2 Spirit. This gives it the ability to penetrate defended airspace and deliver its deep striking payload with pinpoint accuracy. Despite this capability, the MOP has never been used in combat, while the MOAB made headlines when it was dropped in Afghanistan in 2017 against ISIS-K fighters hiding in caves. Military leaders have praised the thinking behind these weapons. Retired Air Force General T. Michael Buzz Mosley once explained that using the MOAB in Afghanistan was a brilliant move, given the target. According to him, commanders spend enormous amounts of time weighing the risks of collateral damage and blast effects. The Moab, despite its size, was chosen carefully because it was the right tool for the job, massive enough to collapse tunnel systems, but deployed in a way that limited unnecessary destruction. For military enthusiasts, both the Moab and MOP represent the extremes of conventional warfare. The Moab is a psychological weapon as much as it is a physical one. Its detonation shakes not just the ground, but also the confidence of anyone on the receiving end. The MOP, by contrast, is a symbol of precision and stealth, designed to remind adversaries that even the deepest bunker is not beyond America's reach. When the Air Force dropped the mother of all bombs in Afghanistan, many people immediately wondered about the price tag of such a massive weapon. Surprisingly, the cost of one Moab is far lower than most advanced missiles. According to the Air Force, each bomb is valued at around $170,000. For a weapon weighing more than 21,000 pounds and unleashing the force of 11 tons of TNT, that figure sounds almost like a bargain. But there is a catch. That price is not a modern production cost, it is a historical estimate from the mid-2000s. A defense official later explained that this figure was never the result of a traditional procurement program. Instead, it came from rough calculations made by an expert at the Air Force Research Laboratory, one of the original developers of the weapon. Much of the Moab's cost was based on spare materials that were already available, such as the bomb's casing and metals. In short, it was pieced together from what the Air Force had on hand, not manufactured through a large-scale contract. Because of this, the Moab does not have a standard price in Pentagon budget documents. Unlike fighter jets or precision missiles, it was not part of a typical research, development, and acquisition pipeline. Air Force spokeswoman Erica Yepsen once clarified that the bombs were developed, built, and tested entirely in-house. No outside research was contracted, and that meant no official procurement cost was logged in the usual way. Still, the Moab did involve some outside expertise. One of the most crucial parts of the weapon is its grid fin technology, which allows the bomb to steer itself with surprising accuracy. These lattice-style fins can guide the bomb to within less than 8 meters of its intended target, remarkable for a weapon of its size. The Pentagon brought in Dynetics Incorporated, a Huntsville, Alabama-based defense company, to help design this feature. According to a 2014 report submitted to the Senate Appropriations Committee, the Air Force first approached Dynetics in 2002 with a contract worth $35,000 to begin developing the fin concept. That relatively small investment led to one of the most important innovations. The grid fins gave the bomb the ability to maneuver through the air, ensuring that when it was released from a cargo plane, it would not simply fall blindly, but instead glide and adjust its path toward the target. Dynetics has remained tight-lipped about its role in the project. When asked about the fins, a company spokeswoman declined to comment and referred all questions to U.S. Central Command. Even Air Force officials admitted they were not entirely certain whether the estimated per-bomb cost included the fin technology or not. This uncertainty reflects how unusual the Moab program truly was. Less a polished acquisition effort and more a one-off project designed for a specific wartime need. Another mystery surrounding the Moab is how many of them exist. Officials have never released the exact figure, but reports suggest there are around 15 bombs in the current stockpile. Their exact locations, of course, remain classified. An auditor could attempt to assign a more precise value to each bomb in storage today, factoring in materials, labor, and upgrades. But the Air Force has kept those details under wraps. For military enthusiasts, this backstory highlights what makes the Moab so fascinating. It is not just its raw explosive power that makes it legendary, but also its origin as a kind of Frankenstein weapon built from spare parts, innovative fin technology, and rapid in-house development. It was designed for a very specific mission in Afghanistan, to collapse caves and strike fear into America's enemies. And it did exactly that. Its relatively low cost and unusual history only add to the mystique of the mother of all bombs. But despite its dramatic first use, there were many questions about whether the Moab would be used often in future conflicts. One issue was cost. The bomb is estimated to cost about $170,000 each. While this is not as expensive as some advanced missiles, experts pointed out that other weapons could deliver similar or even greater explosive force. For example, a single B-52 bomber can carry a payload of bombs that together equal or exceed the power of one MOAB. Another problem was supply. The Air Force has only a limited number of these bombs. They were built in the early 2000s using spare parts and assembled specifically for the war in Afghanistan. Because of this, the U.S. cannot easily replace them if the stockpile is used up. This means commanders will likely save them for only very special missions. Cost may have also been a factor. Unlike the MOAB, which was developed cheaply and in small numbers, the MOP program required significant investment. Harrison explained that between 2009 and 2017, the Air Force budgeted more than $572 million in research and development funding, plus $43 million in procurement for 28 bombs. That works out to more than $21 million per bomb, a staggering difference when compared to the MOAB's estimated $170,000 cost. But in the fight against drug cartels, a question now arises. What happens when the mother of all bombs is added to the battlefield? Many wonder if the cartels can truly stand against a weapon of this scale. The U.S. military's choice to use such a massive bomb wasn't random. Timing played a major role, according to retired General T. Michael Mosley. He explained that the decision may have come down to the situation on the ground when all conditions were finally ready for the MOAB to make the biggest impact. In other words, it wasn't just about having the weapon, but about finding the perfect moment to use it. He suggested the military might have seen an easy match, the right location, the right enemy concentration, and the right time. Still, many asked why the MOAB was chosen instead of other heavy options, like the B-52 Stratofortress. The B-52 can carry more than 50 bombs, each weighing 750 pounds, and when unleashed together, their destruction is comparable to the MOAB's single massive strike. Jeffrey Lewis, a professor at Middlebury College who follows arms control issues, pointed out that the B-52 could have delivered a similar level of damage while offering flexibility. So why gamble everything on one giant weapon? The Air Force's answer was simple. Officials insisted that they have many munitions at their disposal, and each one is chosen based on the target. Anne Stefanik, an Air Force spokeswoman, explained that it isn't about showing off the biggest bomb, but about using the right tool at the right time. For the caves and underground drug labs hidden deep within cartel territory, the MOAB seemed to be the ideal choice. Its blast penetrates deep into the earth, collapsing tunnels and wiping out hidden operations that smaller bombs might miss. This move also sent a psychological message. For the U.S., dropping the MOAB would not be just about destroying a target. It was about showing cartels and the world that America has weapons they cannot possibly match. The nickname alone, Mother of All Bombs, creates an image of unstoppable force, spreading fear even before it detonates. It tells enemies that no place is truly safe, not even underground. The U.S. military has long believed that overwhelming power can break the spirit of its opponents, and the MOAB fit that belief perfectly. Yet the debate continues. Is it necessary to use such a weapon on cartel strongholds, or is it more about making a statement? Critics argue that smaller, more precise strikes could have done the job without the massive display. Supporters counter that the MOAB would not only destroy the target, but also send a clear message that future cartel expansions into underground networks would not survive. Either way, such a strike would reveal just how far the U.S. is willing to go in the war on drugs. For the cartels, the challenge is now clear. They have long relied on secrecy, tunnels, and hidden labs to protect their empire. But with the MOAB in play, those defenses seem fragile. No bunker is too deep, no tunnel too safe. When a weapon designed for military warfare comes crashing down on them. The real question is whether cartels can adapt quickly enough, or if this marks the beginning of a new phase where their underground world is no longer untouchable. It started with a truck packed high with enough fresh cucumbers to feed a small town. But carefully hidden inside was enough lethal cargo to take out an entire city. The cartels got creative in 2024, using America's food supply to move their product past the border. It ran smoothly until 10 United States Marines showed up, the kind of men trained to keep trouble from spilling over. How did they know where to look? And when it was over, who came out on top? Join us as we find out how much damage 10 United States Marines can bring to a ruthless cartel. In 2024, drug overdoses took 80,000 American lives. While families mourned, cartels found a new way to move drugs, one nobody in law enforcement had seen coming. They slipped their operations into the most trusted system in the country, the food supply. Produced trucks turned into weapons without anyone noticing. A shipment of cucumbers might carry more than vegetables. A celery truck could hide cargo worth millions. Pineapples, hollowed out and packed with methamphetamine, crossed the border smoother than any smuggler's dream. Frozen shrimp concealed bricks of cocaine. Watermelons hid fentanyl. To the border guards, it all passed for an everyday shipment. The numbers show the scale. 60 million tons of produce cross from Mexico into the United States each year. Only 8% gets inspected because fresh food spoils quickly and delays cost businesses a fortune. The cartels spotted that weakness immediately. They knew inspectors would rush checks rather than let truckloads rot. The setup runs like a military operation. Packing plant managers take bribes to slip drugs into crates. Truck drivers in on the scheme know exactly how to behave at checkpoints. Farmers' markets turn into quiet distribution hubs. In Georgia, the Atlanta State Farmers Market became the center of attention when agents found the largest meth seizure in DEA Atlanta history, hidden inside celery crates. A bust in Gainesville revealed just how carefully these smugglers operate. 700 pounds of meth moved in small bundles, buried among 30,000 pounds of cucumbers. The packages were wrapped to beat X-ray scanners. Without a tip-off, 500,000 doses would have hit American streets. Cartels study the supply chain like generals study the terrain. They pick produce that spoils fast, berries, lettuce, knowing inspectors can't check every crate without wrecking deliveries. The same system meant to feed the country doubles as their highway for poison. The infiltration runs deeper than most expect. In Arizona, a sting caught a produce company manager taking bribes to load drug-filled crates. It proved just how far the cartels can reach, sliding into legitimate businesses and turning food shipments into silent weapons. Most of the time, detection depends on someone talking. 7 out of 10 major busts start with an informant's tip. Random inspections catch less than 10% of what's moving. If no one speaks up, the drugs flow without resistance. Right now, the upper hand is theirs. The system is built for speed, not security. Every load that slips through funds the next one. Every miss costs lives. Border posts stay short-staffed, and scanners miss the sophisticated hiding techniques traffickers use. Methods sharp enough to impress military engineers. It works because it blends in completely. The same trucks delivering fresh produce to supermarkets also carry enough narcotics to wipe out a city. The cartels figured out the oldest trick in the book. Hide in plain sight. They took one of America's greatest strengths and turned it into their most effective weapon. But as the cartels tightened their grip on the grocery supply chain, a familiar face from their past kept showing up at the border. Each time the authorities sent him away, it barely slowed him down. For him, deportation wasn't exile. It was a quick trip home before the next crossing. Rufino Perez treated America's immigration system like his own revolving door. The first time authorities caught him was in Arizona in 2001, hauling marijuana over the border. They sent him back to Mexico, just as they did with thousands of others. For most people, that would have been the end of it. For Perez, it was only a pause in the workday. He found his way back using fake papers and quiet, unguarded crossing points. Back then, border agents had no real way to track deportees. Perez disappeared into American neighborhoods and went straight back to business, this time moving cocaine. 6 years later, he was caught again. Prison came first, followed by another deportation in 2007. On paper, the system had done its job. In reality, it hadn't worked at all. In 2024, Immigration and Customs Enforcement recorded 7,500 cases of criminals re-entering the country after being deported. Roughly 30% of them worked directly for cartels, running collections, passing coded messages between cells, and moving shipments. Cartels didn't see these men as expelled threats. They saw them as soldiers on temporary leave. The weakness in the system shows up in the numbers. Only 1 in 5 high-risk deportees is properly tracked, a result of years of budget cuts. The rest slip back with the help of professional smugglers or corrupt officials. Cartels pay top rates to get their people home, treating the process like a military extraction. They know seasoned operatives are worth more than fresh recruits. Texas authorities stopped one smuggling run last year that had ferried 15 deported traffickers back into the country. Each seat on that route cost $10,000. The cartels didn't blink. These men already knew the roads, the contacts, and where the gaps in security lay. A rookie needs training. A deportee already knows the playbook. Perez was the proof. His third return went unnoticed for years. He settled in Georgia, keeping a low profile until the right job came along. It did. 700 pounds of meth hidden inside a cucumber truck. Perez sat in a nearby car, acting like a forward scout in a military pickup. Only a tip-off from inside intelligence gave him away. The Department of Homeland Security later reported that in 2025, a quarter of all drug-related arrests involved people who had already been deported once. These weren't chance border crossers looking for work. They were trained operatives returning to complete their missions. Every removal had taught them how to get in more cleanly next time. For Perez, deportation was never a punishment. It was training. His first trip taught him patrol schedules. The second showed him which crossing points were worth avoiding. By the third, he knew exactly how to disappear. Officials on the ground admit the truth. The system doesn't work against cartels. Deport one man, and they bring him back. Money isn't a problem. Smugglers are always available. Corruption is easy to find on both sides of the line. The revolving door spins because the cartels keep pushing it, not as a deterrent, but as a way to sharpen their best people. The revolving door kept turning until one president decided to weld it shut. Not with more arrests, but with military muscle. What happens when America stops calling drug dealers criminals and starts hunting them like enemy forces? In 2025, Trump returned to the White House with orders to unleash the full weight of America's military against the cartels. The tone shifted instantly. 10 United States Marines took positions along the southern border, moving in step with Border Patrol agents. This wasn't policing anymore. It was a combat deployment. His sharpest weapon was the Halt Fentanyl Act, a law that reclassified all fentanyl-related substances as weapons of mass destruction. Sentences jumped to a minimum of 10 years without parole. Asset seizures expanded far beyond cash and vehicles, now including homes, businesses, and anything tied to drug profits. In Arizona, one raid brought in $3 million under the new rules. Then came his boldest move, labeling the Mexican cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. That single step unlocked tools that drug enforcement had never touched before. The FBI could freeze cartel accounts anywhere in the world. The Treasury Department gained power to map and disrupt global financial networks. Intelligence agencies started passing classified information between departments without the usual red tape. The effect was immediate. Treasury agents shut down $60 million sitting in cartel-linked accounts overseas. Street-level busts took a backseat to financial warfare. Suddenly, cartels discovered that moving cash was harder than moving narcotics. Every dollar they lost stalled a shipment, a bribe, or a weapons purchase. Joint task forces became the new norm. DEA brought drug expertise. ICE locked down border operations. U.S. Marshals hunted fugitives. All of it ran through unified command centers, where intelligence flowed like ammunition in a live firefight. The results came quickly. In the first year, cartel-related arrests rose by 20%. One joint operation in New Mexico ended with the capture of a senior Sinaloa figure hiding in a safe house. Agents seized 500 pounds of fentanyl precursors before they could be processed. Homeland Security reported that 70% of major busts in 2025 came from these combined strike teams. California showed just how different the strategy had become. 15 cartel operatives were taken down in a sweep that netted $5 million in dirty money. The focus wasn't on street dealers anymore. It was on cutting off the flow of funds that kept the cartels armed and bribed. Military-grade intelligence marked the targets long before they knew they were under watch. Once the terrorist designation took effect, everything changed. FBI counterterrorism squads used the same playbook they'd used against overseas enemies. Financial tracking systems followed money with the precision of missile guidance. Communication intercepts revealed plans before they could be carried out. The border began to resemble a war front. Drones drifted over smuggling trails, sending live images back to command posts miles away. Helicopters hovered on standby, ready to sweep in on anyone crossing the way air support moves into a firefight. Marines built forward operating bases in the busiest corridors. What used to be a checkpoint now looked and ran like a military front. The cartels found themselves facing something they had never planned for: the full force of American military doctrine aimed squarely at them. This wasn't a series of drug busts anymore. It was a campaign. Every arrest, every seizure, every raid fed into a larger strategy to wipe out entire networks. The war on drugs had finally become a real war, and the people leading it wore stars on their shoulders, not badges on their chests. Trump's military machine needed a target, and on August 8, 2024, they found one big enough to shake the ground. What happens when a routine truck stop turns into a discovery of poison strong enough to kill 500,000 Americans? Gainesville, Georgia, became the stage for the largest coordinated bust in DEA history. For weeks, intelligence teams had been tracing intercepted communications, looking for a break. It came in the form of an 18-wheeler rolling in from Mexico with 30,000 pounds of cucumbers. Packed between the produce sat 700 pounds of pure meth with a street value of $4.5 million. The takedown looked less like a police stop and more like a special forces mission. DEA surveillance teams fanned out around the Gainesville market. Border Patrol joined local police to lock down a perimeter. The plan depended on perfect timing. If the suspects sensed even a ripple of law enforcement, they would vanish. In a nearby car, Andres Chasso Jr. and Rufino Peta Perez waited like forward scouts, ready to guide the shipment into the next phase. Court records later revealed their network stretched across Florida, North Carolina, and beyond. One truck connected to distribution cells across the Southeast, enough meth to generate over 500,000 individual doses. 3 months later, the same pattern repeated. This time it was Atlanta and celery. Behind crates of legitimate produce, a 16-wheeler carried 2,380 pounds of meth. The driver, Jesus Martinez, was sitting on a wholesale stash worth $3.2 million. DEA analysts calculated it could produce over 1 million street doses. Neither bust happened by accident. 70% of major drug seizures come from informant tips, not random checks. In both cases, the DEA tapped its human sources embedded inside cartel operations. These contacts fed agents, shipment schedules, truck routes, and even cargo manifests in real time. The Atlanta State Farmers Market turned out to be a frontline battlefield. It's one of the largest produce distribution hubs in the Southeast, the kind of place where a few extra pallets barely raise an eyebrow. For the cartels, that traffic meant cover. Legitimate shipments and illicit cargo moved side by side, indistinguishable without targeted intelligence. What impressed even military analysts was the precision of the concealment. The meth came in small bundles scattered throughout legitimate loads, breaking up the density patterns that X-ray scanners look for. Each shipment was timed to move with perishable goods, exploiting the urgency to get produce cleared before it spoiled. The Gainesville operation cracked open a network that had been under quiet observation for months. Phone intercepts mapped connections between suppliers in Mexico and distribution cells in the United States. Financial records traced payments flowing back south through complex channels designed to vanish on paper. Each arrest fed more leads into the system. Georgia's agriculture commissioner moved quickly. New screening procedures were ordered for all produce shipments from Mexico. State task forces got extra funding to work directly with federal agencies on joint operations. The stakes went beyond law enforcement metrics. Stopping 500,000 doses in Gainesville meant preventing thousands of potential overdoses. The Atlanta seizure could have fueled major cities for months. Each interception not only cut into cartel profits, but also delayed their next operation. Under the new Halt Fentanyl Act, Martinez and the Gainesville operatives faced mandatory minimums of 10 years without parole. Prosecutors moved to seize their trucks, cash, and any property tied to the smuggling. In court filings, the government didn't talk about these cases as criminal trials. They framed them as combat victories in an ongoing war. These massive busts rattled cartel leadership, but they also exposed something far more dangerous, a flaw baked deep into America's system. What happens when the very thing that fuels your economy becomes the enemy's most effective weapon? The same supply chain that feeds 330 million people every day doubles as a smuggler's dream. Each year, about 60 million tons of perishable goods roll in from Mexico. Any slowdown means crops rot, businesses take multi-million-dollar losses, and politicians start worrying about trade fights with our southern neighbor. Cartels figured out early that America values speed over scrutiny, and they exploit it. Border inspection teams face an impossible job. A true search means cracking open crates, picking through individual boxes, and running them through scanners one at a time. That process takes hours. In the meantime, the lettuce wilts, trucks stack up for miles, and businesses howl at Washington to get the line moving. Criminals treat this time pressure like generals use favorable terrain. At a crossing like Laredo, only about 7% of food haulers get the kind of deep search that would catch a well-hidden load. Customs officers are forced to choose: slow trade to a crawl or gamble that the shipment's clean. The cartels only need one lucky pass to bankroll months of operations. The math is ugly, and it's in their favor. Most big seizures still come from tips, not technology. DEA officials openly admit it. 70% of the major hits start with a human source. Random checks barely scratch 10% of what's moving. When informants dry up, so does enforcement, and the system is stretched thin. Border stations are chronically short-staffed. Many agents spend more time buried in paperwork than inspecting cargo. The scanning gear is there, but there aren't enough trained eyes to interpret the images fast enough. Without the time to dig into anomalies, even the best machines can't keep up. Cartels, meanwhile, learn from every bust. They shift routes, change timing, and rework packaging, the same way a battlefield commander adapts after losing a skirmish. Each failed run is just another lesson for the next attempt. Right now, they hold the initiative. They pick when and where to move. They decide how to hide it. Border enforcement reacts after the play has already started, and every clean run pours money back into refining their system. The uncomfortable truth is that slowing farm imports risks triggering a trade war. Mexico grows produce Americans expect year-round, like tomatoes in January and avocados in February. Agricultural lobbies and importers push hard on lawmakers to keep the border moving. Security takes a back seat to commerce, and the cartels know it. The numbers behind that trade-off are brutal. In 2024, 75,000 Americans died from smuggled drugs. CDC data says most came in through legitimate trade channels. One missed shipment can mean thousands of overdoses. Trump's militarized push has made dents. Fentanyl seizures are down 12% in 2025, arrests are up 20%, and millions in cartel assets are frozen. But the core vulnerability hasn't moved. This is asymmetric warfare in its purest form. The defender has to be perfect every single time, while the attacker needs only an occasional win. The cartels have already factored losses into their budget. They expect to get caught sometimes, and they just work around it. In the end, America faces the kind of bind military planners dread. Keep trade fast and risk infiltration, or slow it down and cripple the economy. For now, the cartels are making sure that choice stays impossible. At midnight, FA-18 Super Hornets launch from a carrier and strike a hardened Venezuelan cartel lab hidden in the hills. Precision sensors pick fleeing men, lasers paint targets, and BLU-109 bunker busters collapse the tunnels in seconds. A hideout is erased, a command node shattered, and a blunt message sent across the region. This is modern naval air power, fast, surgical, and utterly unforgiving. On August 15th, the president ordered 3 Aegis-equipped Arleigh Burke-class destroyers to steam into the southern Caribbean near Venezuela. Gravely, USS Jason Dunham, and USS Sampson. The move was described by U.S. officials as part of a push to pressure transnational criminal groups Washington has labeled threats to U.S. security and to disrupt sea routes used to move fentanyl and other drugs. USS Gravely is a Flight 2IA Arleigh Burke destroyer built for multi-mission work. Gravely uses the Aegis Combat System, a linked set of radars and computers that track air and surface contacts and guide defensive missiles. The ship has a Mark 41 vertical launch system able to fire standard surface-to-air missiles, Tomahawk cruise missiles, and ASROC anti-submarine rockets. It can operate 2 MH-60 helicopters from its hangar and flight deck, extending the ship's search and response reach well beyond the hull. Gravely's propulsion package, gas turbines driving two shafts, gives it the speed and endurance to sustain long patrols. The ship carries a crew trained in air defense, anti-submarine warfare, and boarding operations, so it can shift quickly from surveillance to action when intelligence or rules of engagement allow. Gravely's name honors Vice Admiral Samuel L. Gravely Jr., a historic figure in the U.S. Navy. The ship carries that legacy in its patches and in the way sailors talk about duty and first. That symbolic weight matters on long deployments. Names and history are part of what keeps a crew focused when watches are long and the sea is empty. Operationally, Gravely will likely be used as a high-end sensor and missile node, monitoring aircraft and surface traffic, protecting other ships in the group, and providing missile response if a high-value threat is identified. USS Jason Dunham brings similar weapons and a few public notes about recent operations. Like other Flight 2IA Arleigh Burkes, Jason Dunham has the Aegis system, VLS cells that can fire Tomahawk, Standard, and ASROC rockets, and a hangar for MH-60 helicopters. The ship is roughly 509 feet long and built to sustain long deployments, participate in carrier strike groups, and conduct independent patrols. Public Navy releases show Jason Dunham has returned from extended deployments and worked with carrier groups and allied navies, which speaks to its training and interoperability with other U.S. and partner assets. In an anti-smuggling role, Jason Dunham's helicopters and embarked visit-board search-seizure teams give it the tools to find, approach, and inspect suspicious small craft at sea. USS Sampson is a proven multi-mission destroyer with a history of deployments across the Pacific and allied exercises. Sampson's features include the Mark 41 VLS, a 5-inch gun for surface engagements, torpedo tubes for anti-submarine warfare, and advanced radar and sonar suites for detecting submarines and low-flying threats. Sampson has participated in humanitarian responses, multinational exercises, and long deployments, showing the class's flexibility. For the current patrols off Venezuela, Sampson can perform the same layered tasks as the other two ships: long-range detection, helicopter sorties for scouting and interdiction, close-in naval gunfire if directed, and anti-submarine searches where intelligence suggests subs or narco-subs might be present. Taken together, these three destroyers create overlapping capabilities. Aegis radars on one ship share tracks with the others. Helicopters from many of the ships fly to investigate contacts, and boarding teams move from ship to small boats for inspections. The combination of long-range missiles, anti-submarine weapons, and aviation gives commanders options. Deter suspicious movement with presence, intercept and board small craft, or use missiles if ordered under strict rules of engagement. On board each destroyer, watches and drills replace headlines. Sailors monitor radar and sonar screens, check engine rooms, and run aviation operations. Helicopter crews plan flight lines to sweep shipping lanes for low, fast boats or suspicious loads. Boarding teams rehearse night approaches and searches so they can move quickly and safely when ordered to stop and inspect a vessel. The ship's legal and intelligence officers review evidence and liaise with regional partners so any interdiction fits international law and the mission's rules. Those routines are low drama but high stakes. The ships must avoid incidents that would widen a political clash while still pursuing smugglers who change tactics fast. The Venezuelan government framed the deployment as a violation of sovereignty and mere threats. They must have forgotten a recent encounter when 12 FA-18 Super Hornets slid off the carrier deck into a Black Sea sky. They left in silence, a tight arrow of metal and fuel, each jet carrying the weight of a single clear order: take away the enemy's safe place. The target lay deep in the Golis Mountains, a cave network cut into stone and sealed with concrete. Inside, planners believed, a militant cell had set up a hardened base and stored weapons for future attacks. The choice of the Super Hornet was careful, not flashy. The F-35 brings stealth and sensors. Tomahawks fly far without a pilot, but the mission needed jets that could carry big, heavy weapons, stay in the air long enough to find their marks, and adjust in flight if things change. Each Super Hornet could bear up to 17,750 pounds of external stores. That room for weight meant the pilots could load bunker busters and guidance gear and still have fuel and sensors to spare. The airplanes were the muscle and the brain at once. On the carrier, the deck crew moved like a single machine. The flight deck was a blur of lights and shouted calls, but that noise stopped the moment the jets pushed into the night. Pilots ran final checks, tuned radios to a silent frequency, and locked weapon systems to the mission profile. They would keep strict radio silence now. Surprise was the real armor. The BLU-109 was the centerpiece. This is not a bomb that makes a big surface blast and a lot of smoke. It is a tool built to burrow. A hardened steel case drives it through concrete and packed earth. Inside is a 535-pound explosive heart, and a programmable fuse sets how long the bomb waits before it goes off. The math matters. Penetrate, pause, detonate, collapse from within. The designers meant it to break through up to 8 feet of reinforced concrete or a couple of 100 feet of dense ground, enough to reach the bones of a bunker and make them fail. The plan split the squadron into 4 groups. Each pair of jets took an entrance to the cave system. Ground spotters had painted tiny points of light with lasers, invisible to all but the bombs and the pilots who trusted them. Flying low to stay under the radar, the Hornets kept tight formation until the last moment. Then, at about 4,200 feet, the first 2 rolled in together and dove. From inside the cockpit, it was all speed and focus. The ground rose fast. The HUD glowed green numbers and markers. Pilots watched their flight path, the bomb's seeker locks, and the laser paint that told the warhead where to aim. Release points arrived on a wire of data and training. The bombs left the wings and began the silent arc into the mountain. There were no fireworks to announce the strike. From the air, you might have thought the missiles disappeared into stone. Then, not minutes later, but seconds, the mountain answered. Deep detonations sent internal pressure waves through dark tunnels. Stored munitions inside the caves ignited and added their fury to the first blast. The effect was not a surface crater, but an internal shudder and collapse. Supports snapped, corridors fell in, the safe rooms filled with rubble. This was the point. Conventional bombs conceal an entrance. They can leave a mouth that looks closed, but caves can hide and survive. The BLU-109 struck where the enemy thought they were safest, inside. When the chambers went, the mountain itself became a gravestone for the base. Back on the carrier, mission planners watched feeds and read sensors. Heat signatures, seismic blips, and secondary explosions streamed across screens. The first wave climbed away and formed up. Some crews swung back to check for remaining targets. Others circled to watch for movement. The plan always left room for a second phase, follow-up strikes to finish what the first pass had started, or to hit emergent threats that showed themselves once the dust settled. What the strike did best was deny sanctuary. The cave network had been a place to hide, store, and plan. After the blast, the pathways that let militants move and resupply were gone or too dangerous to use. The mission did not seek only bodies, it aimed to remove the place itself as an option. The war in the dark is a war of rooms and routes. Take the rooms away, and the routes collapse. Precision mattered at every step. The BLU-109 needed a precise hit to reach the pocket of space it would destroy. Lasers from ground teams, special operators who risked being close enough to paint targets, had to be steady and true. Pilots had to time their dives perfectly. The bomb's programmable fuses had to count their fractions of seconds and detonate at the depth that would cause the most structural failure. One mistimed moment, one misread guide beam, could mean the difference between collapse and a wasted strike. When the first wave climbed to safer air, they watched the results. Secondary fires flared and then died. Smoke climbed in thin columns. The mountain's face bore new cracks and scars, but that was not the real measure. The caves, the chambers, the storage pits, they were no longer serviceable. Men who had planned on hiding there would find no practical shelter. Tools and weapons could be buried or destroyed. Plans could be erased. The strike showed another lesson. A small number of aircraft, with the right weapons and accurate intelligence, can do the work that once needed entire campaigns. Years ago, hitting a mountain hideout might have required days of bombing, long runs of ordnance, or a ground assault that risked many lives. Here, a dozen jets in one synchronized hour reached deep, struck hard, and left the terrain unusable. That precision reduces collateral damage and concentrates force where it counts. The operation did not end with the explosions. After the smoke thinned, teams moved in to assess. Sensors told them the major chambers had collapsed. If any militants had survived, escape routes would be narrow and tracked. If any weapons or intelligence caches remained partially intact, follow-up teams would find what the strikes had exposed. The strike's success was both physical and informational. The blast removed shelter, and it revealed what the enemy had hidden. Still, the battlefield kept speaking. Secondary explosions had thrown debris and caused local shifts in the mountain. The aftershocks mattered. The planning staff knew that war has quiet echoes. Caves that seemed dead might hide small pockets where survivors cling to life. Slow, methodical searches would follow, but the initial goal, deny the enemy a safe base, had been achieved. This sort of strike is not about spectacle. They broke the action into a single pulse. Find, fix, strike, and finish, all inside 5 minutes. It began with a flicker on a screen and ended with a chain of command that no longer worked. The AN/ASQ-228, Advanced Targeting FLIR under one Super Hornet, did the seeing. It turned dark rock and shadow into bright shapes and moving heat. It picked out 12 fighters trying to slip through a narrow crevice where no human eye could reach. In a moment, those men were no longer hidden. They were targets. The sensor did more than show heat. Its software separated weapon profiles from bodies, traced motion through brush, and fed exact coordinates into the jet systems. The laser designator on the pod painted tiny invisible dots on each figure. Weapons officers in the backseater and crews on other jets watched those dots appear on their screens. The network stitched those feeds together. One jet could track, another could confirm, and a third could release a bomb, all without a single person on the ground calling the shot. When the command came, the pilots did not chatter. They flew in tight rhythm, eyes on the instruments. The Super Hornet carried both the sensor and the weapons needed to make the strike count. They did not drop dumb bombs. They mapped each target with laser precision and timed each delivery so the blast hit at a depth calculated to collapse the caves from the inside. The BLU-109s were the right tool for that job. Heavy, hard-cased, built to dig through concrete and packed earth and then detonate where it hurt most. What made the kill chain fast was the way the systems linked together. Data moved as if there were no distance between aircraft. Target tracks updated in real time. The weapons crews saw the same picture that the sensor saw. Identification, targeting, and firing happened as a single flow. That flow closed the gap between detection and destruction. By the time the enemy realized they were exposed, there was no time to run. The strike hit near simultaneously across the crevice. The bombs went in, and the mountain spoke from inside. There were no showy crashes on the face of the cliff. The effect was internal. Tunnels bowed and supports failed. Pressure waves rolled through chambers and ignited ammo the fighters had stockpiled. Pieces of the network collapsed into powder and wreckage. Men who had planned an escape found their exits blocked by fallen stone. The result was immediate and strategic. The enemy's chain of command fractured as leaders and messengers were cut off, buried, or scattered. Orders stopped flowing. Units that had depended on a central base found themselves isolated and blind. The operation did more than destroy fighters. It broke the system they used to coordinate attacks. In war, ruining a single node can create ripple effects that spread faster than any reinforcements. This outcome was not an accident. It came from rehearsal, training, and a shared doctrine. Sensors and shooters must think as one. Pilots trained for common movements. Weapons officers learned to read the images the same way. Mission planners rehearsed the handoffs until the most complex actions felt like muscle memory. With that discipline, the whole machine could move as one thought, shaving minutes off a process that used to take hours or days. Technology made that thought possible, but people made it real. Pilots watched the images and verified what the system suggested. Weapons officers ran the math and set fuses to the exact millisecond. The carrier strike group's command staff stayed 2 steps ahead, ready to shift targets, order a second pass, or abort if civilians appeared. Each role mattered. A single mistake could waste a strike, or worse, carry consequences for innocent people. That margin for error forced calm and precision at every level. The system also changed how commanders judge risk. With a standoff sensor like the AN/ASQ-228, jets could stay well beyond the reach of most shoulder-fired threats. That distance let them run longer, watch harder, and fire from positions that kept pilots out of immediate danger. Yet safety did not mean sloppiness. The reliance on sensors required perfect discipline on the ground teams who lasered targets, and ruthless care from pilots who had to trust the data. What happened next showed the flexibility that made the strike decisive. Heat signatures revealed movement in a side tunnel. Rather than head back to the carrier and wait for a new plan, some Super Hornets called for fuel. Mid-air refueling kept them on station. They topped off from tankers, synced with the rest of the group, and executed a second targeted strike minutes after the first. The ability to refuel and re-engage without returning to base turned a single raid into a sustained pressure campaign in real time. That loop, detect, strike, refuel, strike again, kept the enemy from reforming. Where once a force might withdraw, regroup, and reappear a day later, these fighters could unspool the enemy's options in hours. The faster tempo let Allied commanders protect future forces by removing imminent threats before they could move or call for backup. Beyond the bombs and the sensors, the strike was a study in timing. Laser designators needed steady hands. Fuses needed correct programming. The AN/ASQ-228's resolution was critical. It did not simply say, "There's someone there." It showed posture, weight, and movement. That detail converted probable threats into confirmed targets. It lowered the fog of war, making decisions clearer and the use of force more surgical. There was also a moral element. The system's precision reduced the need to send in ground teams into ambushes. It cut the number of people who would have to walk into a trap to confirm the enemy's presence. Saving those lives was part of the calculus. In this strike, the technology protected both attacking crews and special forces who might otherwise have to do the dangerous close work. After the bursts of fire, teams sifted through the data, sensors replayed the event frame by frame, analysts parsed signatures to determine what had been destroyed and what might still be salvageable. Seismic sensors and infrared scans told planners where chambers had collapsed and where heat still pulsed. This after-action feed fed prosecution, intelligence, and future planning. The strike was not an end. It was a source of fresh, usable information. The effect on the enemy was simple: no safe place. They could not rely on caves, bunkers, or buried depots if a sensor from the sky could find a narrow crevice and seed it for collapse. The loss of sanctuary forced them into movement or dispersion, both of which made them easier to track through communications and funds. The psychological shock of seeing a base erased in minutes also spread doubt among survivors, undermining morale and loyalty. The message behind the raid is simple and loud. A carrier and its fighters can reach anywhere, at any time, without asking for permission or waiting for a local base. That mobility changes the map. Where mountains and deserts once felt safe, they now face a sky that sees and a sea that moves. A carrier strike group is no longer only a show of force. It is a strike force, mobile, fast, and able to act alone if needed. In the mountains, removing a leader and his inner circle does more than kill or capture people. It breaks networks. Orders stop moving. Plans collapse. When a command node vanishes, the rest of the group splinters into confusion and fear. That ripple effect protects troops who might move in later. It also buys time for diplomats and law enforcement to act. The mission becomes more than a single hit. It becomes a way to reshape how an enemy fights. The tools that make that possible are not magical. They are aircraft, sensors, weapons, and sailors and pilots who know how to use them together. The AN/ASQ-228F LIR pod turns night into a clear picture. It sees heat and movement through smoke, dust, and brush. It tells you in plain lines where a person stands, who carries a weapon, and which path someone is using to flee. That picture lets pilots mark targets and commanders decide in seconds. Flight deck crews and pilots call the Super Hornet the Rhino because it grew into the role. Bigger, tougher, and more lethal than its predecessors. It is not just a jet for dogfights. it is a flying toolbox. It can carry heavy bombs like the BLU-109 and still have range and agility. It can patrol for hours and then dive for a target the same night. That blend of power and endurance matters when targets hide under rocks and behind trees. Those twin Pratt & Whitney engines give the Rhino thrust. They push the jet fast enough to cross miles of air and to escape danger. The shape of the jet, swept wings and leading-edge extensions, keeps it nimble when a pilot needs to turn tight or dodge threats. But raw speed and maneuverability are only half the story. The Hornet's real strength is its systems: radar, targeting pods, and onboard computers that stitch all the battlefield data into one picture. A strike like the Mountain Raid is a chain. The sensor sees, the pilot confirms, the weapons officer programs the fuse, the bomb drops, the mountain falls. Each link must work, and each person must trust the other. The AN/ASQ-228 gives the first link the edge. It finds people where no one thought to look. From tens of miles away, it points like a finger. The Hornet closes, keeps quiet, and delivers the punch that ends the group's ability to use that place again. Carriers make that process repeatable. A carrier at sea carries not just jets, but tankers, sensors, and crews for days, weeks, or months. If a strike reveals new targets, jets refuel and go again. If the job needs more firepower, the carrier can launch more sorties. That ability to refuel and re-engage keeps pressure on any force that thought running into the hills would save them. This kind of power changes how wars start and how they end. In the past, hitting a fortress might have required a long planning cycle, local permission, and a ground force to clear the wreckage. Now, a carrier can act on its own intelligence and strike within hours. That speed closes the door on escape. It also reduces the need for massed forces on the ground, lowering the risk for soldiers who would have to clear a hardened site by hand. But speed and reach do not mean rough tactics. Precision is the aim. The BLU-109 is a tool designed to break what hides under the earth and concrete. It does not leave a wide blast zone. It goes in deep and detonates, where it will collapse internal chambers. That limits surface damage and focuses destruction where it matters. Combined with the targeting pod's ability to single out people and movement, the result is a strike that ends a base without flattening an entire mountain or village. There is also a legal and political edge to naval air power. Acting from the sea avoids the need for host nation bases. That can matter in places where local politics are fragile or where asking permission would slow action to the point of uselessness. A carrier off the coast holds options: to act, to wait, or to withdraw, all while staying technically independent. For commanders, that freedom is valuable. It lets them respond to threats fast without becoming entangled in local disputes. Technology also speeds the decision loop. Real-time data flows up from the pod to the jet to the carrier and to command centers ashore. That flow means a new picture can create a new plan in minutes. A fleeing group spotted in a crevice can be marked, struck, and finished before it finds another hiding place. The tempo of war increases. The enemy's window to adapt shrinks. Finally, there is the human side. Sailors on a carrier, pilots in cockpits, and ground crews on the deck all accept risk to keep the system running. They also know their actions have consequences beyond the immediate blast. Taking out a mountain base can save future lives, of soldiers, of civilians, of aid workers. But it can also harden attitudes and push fighters to new tactics. That is why follow-through matters. Arrests, prosecutions, and efforts to cut off finances and safe havens after a strike keep the pressure firm and fair. For years, a different kind of war has been raging beneath Mexico's sun-scorched towns. Drug cartels have perfected the art of subterranean fortresses, complete with reinforced bunkers and ventilation. Even the most sophisticated authorities failed to breach these fortresses. But now U.S. weapons have turned the tide, and the safe haven turned into hell on earth. How did the cartels build such impenetrable fortresses? And can modern military technology finally bring them down? Join us as we unravel how the cartel bunkers were destroyed in Mexico. Mexican authorities have been waging a deadly battle against drug cartels for nearly 2 decades, but with limited success. Thousands of Mexicans, including politicians, students, and journalists, die in the conflict every year. The country has seen more than 460,000 homicides since 2006, when the government declared war on the cartels. The United States has partnered closely with its southern neighbor in this fight, providing Mexico with billions of dollars to modernize its security forces, reform its judicial system, and fund development projects aimed at curbing irregular migration. Washington has also sought to stem the flow of illegal drugs into the United States by bolstering security and monitoring operations along its border with Mexico. Over the decades, the cartels have grown, splintered, forged new alliances, and battled one another for territory. The two cartels that pose the most significant drug trafficking threats to the United States, according to the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, are the Sinaloa Cartel and the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJNG. Formerly led by Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, Sinaloa is one of Mexico's oldest and most powerful drug trafficking groups with considerable influence in the Mexican government and public institutions. In addition to fentanyl trafficking, the group engages in extortion, migrant smuggling, oil and mineral theft, prostitution, and the weapons trade. With strongholds in nearly half of Mexico's states, particularly those along the Pacific coast in the northwest and near the country's southern and northern borders. In operations in at least 47 countries, it has a larger international footprint than any of its Mexican rivals. El Chapo is who he is for a reason. He has invented new ways of hiding and carrying out his business underground. Last year in Culiacan, he evaded Mexican Marines by disappearing into a network of subterranean passageways connecting 7 houses. He did not invent smuggling tunnels. Bank robbers, rum runners, and guerrillas had used them for decades. But his criminal enterprise built the first cross-border narco tunnel in 1989. Since then, Sinaloa has refined the art of underground construction and has used tunnels more effectively than any criminal group in history. In the past quarter century, officials have discovered 181 illicit passages under the U.S.-Mexico border. Most have been short, narrow gopher holes, just big enough for a person to crawl through. Sinaloa specializes instead in infrastructural marvels that federal agents call super tunnels. Agents estimate that a single super tunnel takes several months and more than $1 million to build. Many include elevators, electric lights, ventilation ducts, and cleverly disguised entry and exit shafts. They can reach as deep as 70 feet, and they tend to be tall enough for an adult to walk or ride through. These days, most of Sinaloa's super tunnels are used to ferry drugs across the border, from Garita de Otay, an industrial neighborhood in northern Tijuana, to Otay Mesa, a similar area in southern San Diego. Otay Mesa, which is bounded on the north by Brownfield Municipal Airport and on the south by Mexico, consists of highways, strip malls, and a few hundred warehouses clustered near the border. Most super tunnels terminate inside these warehouses, making them difficult to detect. El Chapo was extradited to the U.S., where he's currently serving life imprisonment. But cartel operations are not showing any signs of slowing down. If anything, they are increasing their modes of operation, and strangely or not, they seem to be succeeding. But how long will they last in the face of the Trump administration? On January 20th, 2025, the underground world of Mexican cartels changed forever, and they found themselves perpetually staring at the guillotine. With a stroke of his pen, President Trump signed an executive order declaring these criminal organizations a national security threat beyond traditional organized crime. Initially, it seemed like mere words on paper, but when it fully sank in, it became clear that it was a declaration of war that changed everything overnight. By February 19, the Trump administration took it a step further by officially designating 8 Latin American cartels, including 6 from the neighboring country, Mexico, as foreign terrorist organizations for their major roles in drug smuggling and human trafficking into the United States. The move marks a major escalation in the administration's efforts to cripple the cartels, as an FTO designation grants the administration access to enhanced counterterrorism authorities, such as the ability to launch covert operations authorized by the president. The FTO designation came only days after the Mexican Senate approved the presence of the U.S. Army's 7th Special Forces Group to conduct joint training with Mexico's elite Naval Marine Corps. The designated groups are now on hot seats as it is now obvious that effort would be intensified to nab them. And as if to prove that point, President Trump has signed a directive to the Pentagon to begin using military force against certain Latin American drug cartels that his administration has deemed terrorist organizations, according to people familiar with the matter. The decision to bring the American military into the fight is the most aggressive step so far in the administration's escalating campaign against the cartels. It signals Donald Trump's continued willingness to use military forces to carry out what has primarily been considered a law enforcement responsibility to curb the flow of fentanyl and other illegal drugs. The order provides an official basis for the possibility of direct military operations at sea and on foreign soil against cartels. U.S. military officials have started drawing up options for how the military could go after the groups. The people familiar with the conversation said, speaking on the condition of anonymity to discuss the sensitive internal deliberations. The drug lords responded to the designation, and it was in a way no one expected. Their reply to the U.S. was to go underground, literally burying themselves beneath the surface. Like the military, the Mexican cartel has now introduced the use of bunkers to keep themselves safe. Actually, the bunker idea isn't entirely new to them. Rafael Caro Quintero, a former kingpin in the ring of drug operations, started the use of bunkers to hide from authorities. The bunkers that the cartels have built aren't simple hiding spots. They are sophisticated safe houses hidden underground. They have reinforced concrete walls, advanced ventilation systems, emergency escape tunnels, and communication equipment that can withstand government raids. Remember Sinaloa and CJNG? Well, they're at the center of the bunker operations. It was in Sinaloa state that authorities fully understood the ingenuity of these criminals. They discovered a bunker complex hidden beneath what could barely pass as a farmhouse. There was a water trough just in front of the entrance, and the push of a button caused it to move aside, revealing the entrance. Sounds awesome, but the interior is even more astonishing. Inside the bunker, authorities found living quarters, safe room for keeping weapons, and a command center with multiple computer systems and satellite phones that could rival a modern military mini-command center. To add to that, they even had a medical bay for treating wounded cartel members. That way, they wouldn't have to expose themselves to the public. The CJNG, on the other hand, built similar fortifications in the state of Jalisco. Their bunkers were slightly different from the ones in Sinaloa, as they were built to connect to tunnel systems that allowed for quick escapes across large distances. One discovered tunnel stretched nearly a mile, emerging in a safe house several neighborhoods away from its entrance. El Chapo really outdid himself. The persistence of these underground sites enabled the cartels to disrupt trade routes, intimidate communities, and maintain pressure on the Pacific corridor, amplifying the economic impact of their operations. Each unresolved bunker was simply a liability and an ongoing threat to national and regional security. But there was an additional problem that further complicated matters. The cartel was smart enough to build its fortified sites near residential areas. This crazy tactic limited strike options because if the military went with conventional bombing, they risked significant collateral damage and public backlash. At this point, what is needed is real precision. If the military must attack the bunkers, they had to do it in a way that civilians wouldn't suffer any damage. The strikes had to reach deep, reinforced targets while minimizing harm to surrounding civilian infrastructure. Previously, they just had to bomb the targets and the surroundings through mass raids and heavy ordnance, but now that method was limited. If they tried it this time, it would be ineffective, and in addition to collateral damage, buried command centers might just lose communications for a short time, only to resume operations days later. The cycle of destruction and reconstruction would drain resources and erode confidence in the effectiveness of standard tactics. With all that fortification and strategic positioning, the cartel seemed to be in a favorable position, almost untouchable by neither the Mexican Marines nor the U.S. Navy. But they were wrong. Little did they know that the USS Harry Truman had already deployed its FA-18 Super Hornet. Perhaps the answer to these fortified underground bunkers is a weapon that could reach them with surgical precision, and that's where the Joint Standoff Weapon Variant C comes in. The JSOWC has emerged as the mouth-needed solution to target and obliterate fortified underground bunkers. With its 1,650-pound weight, It was designed to carry out missions where conventional airstrikes fail. Its aerodynamic design allows it to travel up to 70 miles from the point of launch, enabling aircraft like the FFA-18 Hornet to remain safely outside hostile air defense zones while still engaging deeply buried targets. In the early hours of March 28, as the Pacific Ocean swayed with the gentle breeze, the first strike packages moved across the sky in absolute silence. Split into two formations, the FA-18, loaded with the JSOWCS, headed straight for the supposedly impregnable bunkers. And that was the beginning of Operation March 28. There have been multiple operations in Mexico against cartel members, but this very operation unfolded with a level of precision that set it apart from every other. In less than 10 minutes, the FA-18 delivered JSOW strikes against 3 major Mexican cartel sites. The assault was designed to disrupt command structures, sever logistics, and neutralize the underground assets that the cartels so heavily relied on to sustain their operations along the coast of the Pacific Ocean. The first target was the Sinaloa bunkers. Although it was built to withstand attacks from airstrikes, this was no regular airstrip, and the JSOWC was no ordinary weapon. As it defended, its guidance system made final adjustments to its course, ensuring a direct hit. The warhead penetrated layers of concrete and directly ignored the reinforced steel, tearing through it like it was nothing, detonating deep inside the structure. The headquarters collapsed almost instantly, erasing a command post that had previously survived multiple conventional strikes. At the same time, coalition aircraft targeted other bunkers in CJNG. These facilities that El Chapo concealed among residential neighborhoods house large quantities of missiles, drones, and ammunition. This is where the JSOW's penetrating ability came in handy. Each of the strikes had to destroy the targets without endangering the citizens nearby or attracting collateral damage. The result was just as expected. Explosions lit up the place, destroying missiles and drones while leaving the surroundings intact. One critical moment in the operation was the strike on a bunker buried 20 feet below the surface level and camouflaged against aerial surveillance. This was a major headquarters from which the drug lords ran major operations. The JSOWC, guided by infrared sensors and GPS, identified a hidden air vent, which was the only vulnerability of the bunker. The weapon easily penetrated through this vent and detonated inside, obliterating everything in its path and severing the command center. The destruction of this command center was a huge blow to the cartel's coordination, disrupting their ability to launch complex attacks. Just how powerful is the JSOW-1 to wreak such havoc in cartel strongholds? The U.S. Navy's most accurate warship killer, JSOWC-1, operational on FA-18 fighters. The U.S. Navy has completed arming its McDonnell Douglas FA-18EF Super Hornets aboard its fleet of Nimitz-class aircraft carriers with the new Joint Standoff Weapon, the Navy's first air-to-ground network-enabled weapon that can identify and sink fast-moving enemy warships. The precision-guided weapon uses GPS technology, inertial measurement unit guidance technology, and an imaging infrared seeker in the final phase of flight to find and attack enemy warships. The JSOWC moving maritime target capability allows the missile to fly to an updated queue from its controlling platform and later transition to an image recognition scene matching process enabled by an onboard database of ship characteristics stored in the weapon. JSOWC achieved operational status in June 2016 and is now deployed with all the Navy's carrier air wings. CVWS network-enabled technology gives the FA-18 Super Hornet a vastly increased attack envelope against a wider range of threats, such as enemy warships, small boats, and submarines at sea. JSOWC will also be fired from the Navy's carrier-launched variant of the Joint Strike Fighter, the F-35C. This highly accurate glide weapon is specifically designed to destroy maneuvering, high-speed warships such as modern destroyers at longer distances. It also allows direct attack on enemy air defenses, contesting U.S. Navy attack aircraft. The C-1 is an air-to-surface, standoff from point defense weapon used against a variety of targets. Older versions of the C-1 arm all U.S. Navy attack aircraft, And this weapon's success in combat since it was first used in 1998 has made it one of the most successful weapons in the Pentagon's history. The basic JSOW, or the AGM-154, is a low-cost, highly lethal glide weapon with a standoff capability. The JS family of air-to-surface glide weapons are 450 kilograms bombs that provide a standoff of 28 kilometers at low-altitude launch and up to 110 kilometers at high-altitude launch. JSOW is a fire-and-forget weapon that employs a coupled GPS-INS navigation system. The C1 model is integrated with the Link 16 network radio, allowing the weapon to attack moving maritime targets. A two-way data link allows the FA-18EF and F-35C launch aircraft, or another controller, to provide real-time target updates to the weapon, shift it to a different target, or abort the mission. It is armed with the new broach warhead, a two-stage warhead. The initial stage uses a shape charge to bore a narrow tunnel through up to 6 feet of reinforced concrete or 3 feet of steel. This penetration is not the end goal, but rather the entry point for the weapon's main warhead. Once inside, the second stage detonates, generating a pressure wave of 5,000 per square inch, enough force to collapse internal structures and neutralize personnel or material within a 30-meter radius. Thousands of steel fragments are dispersed in the blast, maximizing internal destruction and increasing the likelihood of secondary explosions if munitions or fuel are present inside the bunker. Unlike earlier generations of bunker-busting munitions, which often relied on sheer explosive mass and repeated sorties, the JSOWC delivers precision and efficiency in a single strike. A defining feature of the JSOWC is its advanced infrared IR seeker, which activates roughly 30 seconds before impact. This system scans the target area, detecting subtle temperature differences that reveal vents, entry points, or concealed structures invisible to other guidance methods. During the strike on the headquarters bunker, for instance, the IR seeker identified a small camouflaged air vent. This last 30-second infrared scan gave operators a final course correction critical for zero-margin targeting. The ability to distinguish genuine targets from decoys or camouflage ensures that the JSOWC's payload is delivered with maximum effect and minimal risk of error. While it cannot be denied that Mexico has tried to solve the cartel puzzle, they have failed in its attempts because, unlike the US that does not negotiate with terrorists, Mexico prefers to employ diplomacy in dealing with the issue, a method that has consistently failed. And now Mexico is under pressure from the US government to do something. Quite recently, the government of Mexico sent more than 24 suspected cartel members to the US amid rising pressure from President Donald Trump on Mexico to dismantle the country's powerful drug organizations. They shipped 26 prisoners, who the US wanted for ties to drug trafficking groups, Mexico's Attorney General's office and Security Ministry said in a joint statement. According to them, the U.S. Department of Justice had requested their extradition after promising that it would not seek the death penalty for the accused cartel members. Surprisingly, this transfer is not the first of its kind. It's the second of its kind this year. Earlier in February, Mexican authorities sent 29 alleged cartel leaders to the U.S., and that sparked a debate about the political and legal grounds for such a move. The fact that President Claudia Sheinbaum of Mexico permitted yet another large-scale extradition of Mexican nationals shows just how much pressure the country is under as she seeks to appease Trump while also avoiding further unilateral U.S. military action in Mexico. According to a statement issued by the U.S. Embassy, among those extradited were key figures in the JNGC and the Sinaloa Cartel, which are Mexico's two dominant organized crime groups. Trump has tied tariffs on Mexico to the deadly fentanyl trade, claiming the country hasn't tackled drug cartels aggressively enough. Last week, he directed the Pentagon to prepare operations against Mexican drug gangs that have been designated global terrorist organizations. Some people believe that the U.S. and Mexico are nearing a security agreement to expand cooperation in the fight against cartels. But there's still debate on whether unilateral action by the U.S. military in Mexico is a good idea. In the dark chessboard of global power, one wrong move can set off a storm. When a Venezuelan spy ship dares to slip into American waters, Washington's patience snaps. This isn't just about oil, borders, or old disputes. It's about testing the U.S. resolve. And America has shown before, from Iran's nuclear bunkers to the Houthis' hidden strongholds, what happens when that line is crossed.
President Trump has been very clear and consistent. He's prepared to use every element of American power to stop drugs from flooding into our country and to bring those responsible.
What unfolded next decides not just Venezuela's fate, but the balance of power in the hemisphere. Lights up on the open sea, a steel tower floats on the horizon, the Liza Destiny, a huge oil platform feeding a modern boom. Men in orange coveralls walk like ants along its decks. The platform belongs to ExxonMobil, a giant American oil firm. On May 1st, 2025, a white hull that should not have been there cuts across the calm. A Venezuelan Coast Guard patrol ship moves into waters Guyana says are its own. The move is not just rude, it is a spark tossed into a long, dangerous argument. Guyana answered fast. Its leaders called the action an incursion.
Any move by Venezuela to occupy any space within Essequibo that belongs to Guyana.
They summon diplomats. They move forces and say they would protect their sea and the workers who depend on it. Guyana asked the world to watch and ask for a calm, peaceful fix, even as its military goes on alert. Venezuela pushes back. Caracas says the waters are part of a zone still being argued over. It says its ship had every right to be where it is. The two governments are not just trading words, they are trading claims that reach back a century and that now sit in courts and intense sea lanes. This fight runs on oil and history. Offshore fields near the disputed Essequibo area make the stakes huge. Exxon's floating production unit is not a toy. It means jobs, money, and power, and it makes the map on paper suddenly worth guarding with real ships. Where maps conflict, sailors test the lines. When those sailors sail close to foreign platforms, alarms ring far beyond the deck. Washington watches closely. The United States warns against interference with oil operations and says it stands by Guyana's right to operate in its waters. Then the U.S. moves warships into the area, a visible, blunt signal that the U.S. is not ignoring the matter. 3 Arleigh Burke-class Aegis-guided missile destroyers aren't named for the deployment. USS Gravely, USS Jason Dunham, and USS Sampson. They steam toward the Caribbean and the eastern edge of the South American shelf. The message is simple. The sea is watched. These destroyers are not pretty parade ships. They are tools built to see and strike, to listen under the waves, and to shield whole fleets from danger. At their heart sits the Aegis combat system, a web of radar, computers, and weapons that can spot many threats at once and help the ship pick which to stop first. The radars can pick up targets far beyond the horizon, and the ship's vertical launch cells can send out missiles that hit fast boats, enemy planes, missiles, or even targets on land. They carry guns for close fights, launch torpedoes at submarines, and can put a helicopter in the air to widen their reach. In short, they can watch, warn, and fight in the air, on the surface, and below the waves. The USS Gravely DDG-107 arrives with a hard edge. Built on the Arleigh Burke hull, Gravely looks low and mean in the water. Rows of flat, slanted panels make up its radar face, a cut-glass shield for electronic eyes that never sleep. Inside its belly are rows of missile cells, Mark 41 vertical launchers, ready to fire standard anti-air missiles, ESSMs for quicker threats, or long-range Tomahawks for striking inland targets if needed. Gravely can also carry Sikorsky MH-60 helicopters that hover over the sea to sniff out submarines or to drop off boarding teams. Its crew moves with the slow, sure rhythm of people who know every bolt on their ship. The ship's namesake, Vice Admiral Samuel L. Gravely Jr., adds a human story, a man who broke barriers and fought hard for his country. The USS Jason Dunham DDG-109 is next, a ship named for a Marine who gave his life by covering a grenade to save others. That legacy hangs on the hull like a silent promise. Jason Dunham brings the same layered defenses: Aegis radar, a fast-reacting combat system, and vertical launch tubes ready to switch roles in a heartbeat. On its decks, missile launchers share space with a 5-inch gun, and launch rails give the ship options, from warning shots to heavy strikes. For a government that wants to show force without firing a shot, a ship like Jason Dunham is the perfect actor. Large, capable, and easy to spot on a wide blue stage. Then comes the USS Samson, DDG-102, a veteran built to last. Samson carries the same suite of tools: top-grade radar, surface-to-air missiles, anti-ship missiles, and anti-submarine gear. It can chase a submarine with hull sonar, while its helicopter searches above. If anything breaks through, close-in weapon systems can put down an incoming missile in the ship's last moments of safety. Samson's past missions show a ship that helps allies, answers distress calls, and moves fast when trouble appears. In calm seas, her silhouette is almost graceful. In tense moments, she is a warning that the United States has more than words in its pocket. What does it mean to send 3 destroyers? It is a careful kind of noise. These ships are smart and broad in reach. They can track aircraft and missiles at long range, spot small boats at sea, and call helicopters and planes into action. They can fire Tomahawk cruise missiles to hit a target hundreds of miles away, or they can swap to anti-air missiles that protect ships and planes nearby. They also carry systems to hunt submarines and to defend themselves from fast, low attacks. That range of tools gives the U.S. many options. Watch closely, stop a dangerous move, or, if the rules change, strike back. The presence of these ships is meant to cool things down by showing what might happen if the conflict grows. The sea holds its breath. Far from shore, the blue rolls on. Above that blue, machines hang like ghosts. Below, something moves in the dark. And on the decks of faraway ships, men and women watch every beat. The White House put a lot on this sweep. About 4,000 sailors and Marines are set to watch and wait in the Southern Caribbean. They are not just a number. They are teams with faces, dog-eared charts, and cold coffee. They walk the decks, check radios, clean boots, and learn the names of the planes and boats that would watch the water. Their orders are quiet and sharp. Keep eyes on the sea, gather proof, and be ready. High above the waves, P-8 planes cruise. These are long-winged birds of metal and glass. They fly low enough to see the sea and high enough to avoid cheap trouble. A P-8 moves like a slow shark across the sky. It carries eyes and ears no single man can match. Sensors sweep the water surface. Radios listen for faint talk. Cameras lock on a hull and hold it like a worried parent. The plane can mark a ship, follow it, and pass that mark to ships far below. In plain words, P-8s spy. They watch fuel lines and radio calls. They count people on deck. They make maps of every move. On a clear day, a P-8 looks like a dot. But to the men on the ships, that dot means someone is always watching. They fly patrol after patrol. They trace the Venezuelan patrol ship from dawn to dusk. They move in slow circles above the platform and the stranger ship. They do not roar past. They stay. Their crews take pictures, log times, and whisper into secure lines. One P-8 would point, another would map the route, a third would listen to radio chatter. Down on the water, the warships know they are seen. The Venezuelan captain feels the weight of that gaze too. On the sea, the 3 destroyers cut through the waves. Behind them, smaller escorts and supply ships move in a steady line. They send signals, call aircraft, and set nets of radio to catch any hint of bad moves. Men on deck smoke or stare at the horizon. They check missile systems. They kept the ship's options open. But the most secret thing in the water is quiet and cold, and maybe scary. An attack submarine slips into the deep like a shadow that has learned to hide. A submarine is the Navy's secret fist. It can sit unseen beneath the waves. It listens, it hunts. If a ship up top makes a reckless move, the sub can be close enough to matter in seconds. The sub can trail a ship without it knowing. It can send warning signs. Or if the order comes, it can strike. Torpedoes and sometimes cruise missiles sit in its belly. Those are not for show. They are for the end of a story, if the story must end in fire. In this watchful net, the sub's job is simple. Find, follow, and be ready. If the Venezuelan ship tries to ram, to board, or to fire on the platform, the sub could surface, call in help, or, in a dire turn, carry out a strike on a clear target. The sub gives leaders quiet power. It makes an option that opponents do not see until it matters. That is why a sub under the waves can calm a fight above them. It whispers that the sea is not safe for violent games. This plan is not a single-day show. It is a long watch. For months, American planes and ships would patrol international airspace in international waters. They would not cross a border or step on a dock without cause. The plan was clear: operate where the law allows, gather the facts, show the flag, and be ready for orders. Men and women on those ships would take turns, sleep under pumps and radar, and log every move. They would keep a steady hand and a calm face. The naval assets are more than cameras and guns. They are a toolkit. They would gather intelligence, yes, photos, radio calls, and tracks. But they could also be a launching pad. If a decision was made in Washington, a hard legal decision, those ships and planes could carry it out. Missiles could be struck from afar. Aircraft would strike from above. Helicopters could drop off small teams. Submarines could launch missiles that fly for miles. That power sits on the decks like a silent promise. It is there if needed. Back in Caracas, the words are loud but not new. President Nicolas Maduro speaks to his people. He says Venezuela will defend our seas, our skies, and our lands. He calls the moves by the United States a sign of a declining empire, something the people can sneer at and rally against. The words are meant to make his mates feel safe. They are meant to show brass and bravado. But words only go so far when metal and glass point across a wide sea. Below the speeches, the Trump administration has another line of thinking. Mr. Trump puts a big focus on cracking down on drug cartels. He says this is part of a wider plan: limit migration, stop drugs, and make the border safer. To do that, the U.S. moves forces into the area for months. Warships are already used to help border security and to chase drug routes. The government calls some gangs terrorist groups. It steps up surveillance in the air over Mexico and the Caribbean to learn how these cartels move men and drugs. In short, this mission ties to old fights into new ones. That mix of aims, oil, maps, drugs, and politics makes the water around the platform tense. A move means different things to different people. For Guyana, it is about guarding a project that can shape a country's future. For Venezuela, it is about claims and pride. For the United States, it is about keeping a seat at the table and protecting partners. For the men in the sub and on the planes, it is a simple rule: watch well, act only on clear orders, and do no harm that is not needed. Seeing the U.S. closely monitoring the Venezuelan warship, you might remember similar pictures: a big Russian frigate and a low, dark submarine moving into Havana's harbor. The ships passed old stone forts. Cuba greeted them with cannon fire. Diplomats waved. It looked like a show, not a secret trip. The two Russian ships that drew the most eyes were the Admiral Gorshkov frigate and the nuclear-powered submarine Kazan. Both are modern and built to carry heavy weapons. Russia said the ships were there after missile drills in the Atlantic. It said the visit was routine, but the ships were not ordinary. Russia has pushed new missiles into service that worry many military planners. Names like Zircon and Kaliber came up in news reports. Fast missiles that can fly long distances and hit ships or land targets. That fact changed the tone. What might have been a friendly visit looked also like a display of new power. The United States watched closely. U.S. officials said they did not see an immediate threat. At the same time, the U.S. kept sensors on the ships and sent its own vessels and subs into the wider area. Monitoring in this case meant two things: public words saying, "We see this," and quiet actions that made sure Washington really did see everything. The U.S. does not always announce every move, but when big Russian warships came near the Americas, the U.S. made clear it would track them. Why watch so closely? Because modern warships and subs can carry weapons that strike far away. A frigate like the Admiral Gorshkov can launch cruise missiles. A modern nuclear sub like the Kazan can move under the water, unseen, and carry cruise missiles or torpedoes that are hard to stop. When such ships show up close to another country, leaders worry about warning time. They worry about the sudden change in the balance of forces. That is why monitoring is not just curiosity. It is part of keeping a deck of options open. The U.S. used both words and moves to respond to the Russian visit. Officials said they were watching and asked for calm. At the same time, U.S. naval units were active nearby. One U.S. attack submarine was noted to have been close to the region as the Russians arrived. The U.S. kept its watch even while saying it did not expect an attack. That balance, say you are calm while quietly preparing, is how big powers often act when one side wants to show strength. For Russia, the visit did two jobs. First, it showed that Moscow can move big, modern ships to far seas. That sends a message at home and abroad. Russia can still reach places far from its ports. Second, it opened a public stage. People in Havana saw the ships, photos were shared, and the visit made the news worldwide. That public part matters in a world where images shape opinion as much as facts do. For the U.S., wherein the visit was a test of vigilance, the Pentagon's reply was to keep eyes on the sea and keep forces ready to act if needed. Analysts and officials compare this to Cold War-style shows of force. Big moves meant to make an opponent think twice. But the modern answer is layered. Tracking radar, spy planes, ships on the surface, and quiet subs below. These tools build a live picture of what Moscow is doing. That picture helps leaders pick the next step without panic. There was also a careful message in the U.S. behavior. By watching, not rushing to clash, the U.S. signaled it would not make a crisis out of every strong move. The U.S. picked a steady watch over sudden action. That approach tries to cool tension by proving two things at once. We see you, and we will not be baited. If the situation got worse, the same sensors and ships that watched would become the tools to act. That is the hard logic of modern naval games. Russia framed the visit differently. Kremlin spokespeople said there was no reason for the U.S. to worry. They called such visits routine and said diplomatic channels should not be ignored. That language aims to lower alarm while still showing the fleet can travel far and carry serious weapons. The choice of words is part of the message. Show power, but deny threat. It is a thin line, meant to keep partners reassured while making rivals think. When the two sides act this way, Russia moving ships near the Americas, the United States watching them closely, the global picture tightens. Other nations notice. The media covers it. Lawmakers ask questions. The moves become not just a local event, but a wider signal about how each country plans to use its navy and its newer missiles. In short, these are not private trips. They are public talks in a loud language: steel, speed, and reach. What comes next is often slow and quiet. Big navies patrol, reports go to officers and ministers, and diplomats trade notes. Both sides want to avoid a sudden clash, yet both hope their signals have weight. Russia shows its long reach and new weapons. The U.S. shows its ability to monitor and its will to respond if needed. At sea, that is the face of modern power. A mix of hard tools and careful words, each meant to shape the other's choices. In the end, watching is a form of power. And if Venezuela does not learn to keep a distance and respect maritime laws, it might have to learn the hard way. Iran can still remember Midnight Hammer. The date was June 22, 2025. The plan read like a page from a thriller. Long-range bombers, stealth fighters, and a silent submarine all moved in the dark to hit 3 Iranian sites: Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. 7 B-2 stealth bombers lifted off from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. The planes flew east, far across the globe. They stayed aloft for a very long time. On the way and back, the B-2s were refueled from other planes in midair several times. Reports say they kept in near silence on the radio and moved as one long, careful line toward the target area. Before the B-2s crossed into Iranian airspace, they were accompanied by the newest U.S. fighters. The F-35s and F-22s, quiet, hard to spot, went ahead. Their job, in public accounts, was to draw attention from air defenses, to be the first to see if Iran would fire back. In the end, officials said Iran fired no defenses during the mission. U.S. leaders pointed to recent strikes on Iranian air defenses, by others, as a reason those defenses may not have worked. Whatever the reason, the American strike force met little or no resistance, according to the official lines. At about 2:10 a.m. local time, the B-2s did what they were built for. 6 of them dropped 12 GBU 57AB massive ordnance penetrator bombs on Fordo. Those are very large bunker-busting bombs meant to break through heavy layers of rock or concrete. The 7th B-2 dropped 2 of the same bombs on Natanz. Public descriptions say the bombs were aimed down ventilation shafts and other hard points, so the blast would reach deep into the buried facilities. The intent, as stated by officials, was to damage parts of those sites that support the nuclear effort. While the B-2s were above, a U.S. submarine took part from below. A sub fired about 30 Tomahawk cruise missiles at Natanz in Isfahan. Tomahawks fly long distances and can be launched from under the sea, traveling to hit targets on land. The whole attack, planes dropping big bombs and missiles arriving by sea, unfolded over a short window. U.S. sources placed the strikes in a tight time frame. The public story said the active part of the mission lasted roughly half an hour, with Tomahawks arriving as the last phase. The operation was not only the work of those striking platforms. In total, more than 100 aircraft were involved. Fighters, tankers for refueling, and special planes for surveillance and communications. The mission was put together with many moving parts, the sort of coordination that takes long planning. The B-2's long flights, multiple refuels, and the mix of air and sea weapons show the reach and the complexity of modern strikes. Back in Washington, the Situation Room held leaders and advisors. Photos that circulated showed top officials in a tense, bright room, watching maps and waiting for feed from the field. A decision like this is both military and political. The leaders who authorize such strikes weigh risk and law, and they know the next day's headlines will carry the story around the world. In another region, U.S. and allied forces struck Houthi positions in Yemen. Those operations were described as a response to attacks on shipping and to the Houthis' use of missiles and other weapons that threatened civilian vessels and ports. Accounts list many air raids across Yemen. Strikes hit military sites, but also some places that caused civilian casualties. Local reports told of strikes on a residential area in Sana'a that killed and injured people, and of attacks on a major military area at Sana'a airport that left smoke and damage. Other hits were reported across Sa'ada, Taiz, Al-Baida, Damar, Haja, and Marib. The public record said the strikes were carried out by carrier-based jets from the USS Harry S. Truman and by Air Force planes and armed drones from regional bases. Those Yemen strikes show the blunt side of power. When leaders decide the risk of inaction is too high, they strike quickly and hard. The cost is human and political. Reports of civilian deaths and damaged infrastructure bring protests, questions in parliaments, and diplomatic notes across the region. That is the heavy trade-off behind any public line about defending shipping or protecting lives. Midnight Hammer and the Yemen strikes share one clear lesson. Modern military power is layered and global. Bombers fly from distant bases and can be refueled aloft to reach far targets. Stealth fighters and other aircraft shape the sky. Submarines and ships add power from the sea. Intelligence and surveillance planes watch, and mobile refuelers keep the fleet moving. The hardware is costly. The decisions around using it are weighty. That leads to the present watch in the Caribbean. The U.S. showed it could move and act beyond nearby waters. The same reach that sent B-2s across the globe and the same mix of air and sea tools used near Yemen is what backs up U.S. patrols near the Venezuelan incident. The aim this time may be to deter, to gather proof, and to keep options ready. Options that leaders say they will use only after long thought and legal checks. And what about a ship like USS Gravely, DDG-107? Gravely is an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer. It carries a powerful radar system called Aegis. It has vertical launch cells that can hold many types of missiles. It has a 5-inch gun, torpedoes, and a flight deck for helicopters. It can see far, talk to other ships and planes, and act as a hub for a larger force. That means a ship like Gravely does 3 main things in a tense moment. First, it watches. Its radars and sensors can find and track ships and aircraft. Second, it warns. Its presence alone can push a rival to slow, turn away, or call for talks. Third, it gives leaders choices: to keep watching, to call in other forces, or to carry out a lawful, ordered response. The ship's tools can be used in many ways, and those ways are kept under tight rules and laws that leaders must follow. If Venezuela does not read those signals, the planes overhead, the ships in the lanes, the quiet hum of distant subs and command centers, the country risks a hard lesson. But hard lessons have human costs. They are not a first choice for governments. That is the quiet, uncomfortable truth behind the headlines and the maps.